Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome y'all to the monthly Excel BI Business Intelligence Virtual Chapter meeting. Today we have Dustin from Microsoft, which we're very glad he's able to join us to talk about some of the new stuff in Power BI, which seems to come out monthly, if not every other week or so. But before we get started with his presentation, first of all, I'd like to tell you that this session is being recorded. It'll be posted on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, as well as linked in our PASS website. And let's talk a little bit about PASS and the community itself that puts on these virtual chapters. First of all, what's coming up in May is a business analytics conference. It's in San Jose, California. On May 2nd, Monday, there are pre-conference sessions. On the 3rd and 4th, there will be hour and 2-hour long sessions along with labs. We have a couple keynote speakers, and it's all about analytics, Power BI, Excel, big data, visualizations. It's going to be many hours and many networking opportunities. You can register at passbaconference.com. If you want to, you can email us, excelbivc@sequelpass.org, and I can give you a discount code, which is either $100 or $200 off the conference itself. If you refer a friend to it, you're in a program to receive a $50 Amazon gift card. There are many virtual chapters in the PASS community. We encourage you to go to the virtual chapter site and check out what's out there and find the one that most fits what you're doing today. There's upcoming SQL Saturdays. If you don't know what a SQL Saturday is, it is a free Saturday, other than maybe they might charge you for lunch at some of them, but it's free training. They're here in America as well as international, in Canada, all over the place. There's always one going on near you at least once a year. I'm sure within 100 miles of where you live. So check out the SQL Saturday site to find some of this free training. Of course, there's voluntary opportunities. That's what I do here with the PASS community. I love volunteering and helping. Not only does it help me meet and get introduced to people in our areas, I have contacts that I can go to find information that I don't know that I know someone else is an expert in. So go to volunteer.sequelpass.org. It's part of being registered with PASS, and you can update your profile to tell them what volunteering opportunities exist and you would like to be a part of. You can communicate with PASS on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, as well as a website. And without further ado, we'll get started with Dustin.
All right, thank you, Thomas, and thank you again for having me here. It's always fun to get and chat with the user groups and the virtual chapters, and getting to meet folks and chat with them about cool stuff, especially like Power BI. So thank you for having me back. All right, so can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, okay, great. So today we're going to talk about what's new in Power BI, and just give you a brief introduction of myself. My name is Dustin Ryan. I'm a data platform solution architect with Microsoft, and I work on the education STU. And so that means all of my customers are K-12 and higher ed institutions, and so we work with them to get them set up on SQL Server, working with business intelligence, and really anything around data platform. And so I've been working with SQL Server and BI and designing data warehouses for the past 7+ years or so, I guess 7.5 years, and I'm also an author, blogger, and speaker, and data nerd. And so my website is SQLdusty.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at SQLdusty. So today we're going to talk about what's new in Power BI, and like Thomas was saying, if you start thinking about what's new in Power BI, I mean, how far back do you want to go to consider something new? I mean, they release a weekly update to the Power BI service. So literally every week you have new features coming out for the Power BI service, and then they release monthly updates for the Power BI desktop. So if you consider new, which is the latest features, then we're really only talking about features that have been released in the past month. But for the purpose of this, we're going to discuss features that have been out for probably since the end of last year. We're going to discuss some features, and there's far too many features for me to cover everything that has been released in the past year. So way too many features, and so I'm going to try and hit some of the high points, point out some of the cool stuff, some of the neat stuff, and the stuff that I think will be more applicable to us, and some of the major things, and we'll kind of and discuss those. And by all means, if you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat window. Thomas is gracious enough to help me out with the questions, and so we'll cover the questions during the middle of the session. So I want to make sure you guys get your questions answered. So don't hesitate to ask questions. And so that's what we're going to cover here. Alrighty. Okay, so first I want to start here in the Power BI desktop. And so let me pull this up here into our screen. And there's some new features that have come out around using direct query. And so what I mean by direct query is using a live connection to your on-prem data sources, like SQL Server, Oracle, or Teradata. So recently, the ability to use a live connection to Oracle and Teradata was released. And so we've had the ability to create a live connection to a SQL Server database, but they've recently made some improvements here. And so that's kind of where I want us to start when we're talking about what's new in Power BI. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to create a live connection to my SQL Server database. And I'm running SQL Server 2016 release candidate 0. Okay. And I'm going to connect here to my SQL Server instance. And I've got a demo database here that has some student data around donations and things like that. And so I'm going to select the fact donations. And let's get some related tables in here. And I don't really care what the related tables are in here for now, but we'll go ahead and do that. And I'm going to click load. And when I click load, you've got a couple of options here. You can select to either import the data. And so Power BI is going to send a query to the SQL Server, import the data into the Power BI model, and then store it as an in-memory data model. So it's basically, analysis services tabular running behind the scenes here in Power BI. So I can import it, or I can use direct query. And so direct query is going to be very valuable when you have a large database that's too big for you to bring all the data into Power BI. So if you imagine a scenario where you've got a 3 terabyte data warehouse, and we certainly can't import all 3 terabytes into our Power BI model, but we'd still like to be able to query it. That's where direct query is going to be very useful for those customers that have really big databases, but we can't bring it all into Power BI, so we want to be able to run direct query against it. Okay, I'm going to click OK here. All right. Now, one of the new features that we get with direct query is that we have the ability to create measures based on this data. So previously with direct query, really the only thing that you could do was just directly query the data set and just bring in the actually I don't know if I've got any data for this measure here, but really the only thing that you were able to do was to bring in the data. And let's see, donation amount. Let's do donation amount. There's actually data for that metric. With direct query previously, you could only just add the fields and use the implicit measures here. But now there's a new feature out where we can actually create calculations in it. So if I want to create a calculation based on the data here, even though this isn't direct query, I can create a new measure. So I just come up to my modeling column or my modeling tab, select new measure, and then I can create my measure just like I normally would when I was importing the data. So I'll just call this sum of, let's see, fact donation, we'll call it donation amount, okay? And so now I can create a calculated measure. Okay, let me hit enter. All right, there it is. Oops, added it to the wrong table. Anyway, let's see if we can move it down here. Let's see. Here we go. Let me recreate it in the right table here. just for organizational purposes. Okay, we'll call it total donation amount. Okay, there we go. Now I've got it in the right column. And so now you can see that we've got our new calculated measure in here. And so now I can just use this. And so this is really nice because now we can start to do really cool things like create our time calculations. Even though we're using direct query, we can do neat things like create our calculations, create powerful time calculations, create all kinds of really powerful calculations that very difficult to do on SQL Server, especially when we're talking about time calculations like year to date and month to date, and creating dynamic calculations based around those types of functions. Very tough to do in SQL Server, but very easy to do with DAX. And so that's one of the new improvements, is that we can now create the calculations in our Power BI model when we're using a direct query here, like against SQL Server. One of the other things that they've added, and this is a minor thing, but is actually very nice, because if you've been working in Power BI recently, you've probably run into some of these challenges with creating calculations. Is that if I come in here and I rename a column like a donation amount, so if I right click on this and select donation amount, and I just call it donation amount 2. Previously, when I would do that, it would break things, right? It'd start breaking calculations, breaking any calculated measures, calculated numbers. Now, when I rename a column, it doesn't break my calculation. So if I come here and look at my total donation amount calculation, you'll see here that, oops, it did not like me zooming in there. You'll see here that it's renamed the calculation here for me. So donation amount 2, it automatically did that for me. And so this is really nice for those users that have very complicated Power BI models, where maybe you have some calculated fields, and you also have some calculated measures, and those calculated measures maybe are layered in a way. Maybe you're creating, you got a total donation amount calculation, then you've got a year-to-date total donation amount, and all these different kind of calculations that are layered upon other calculations. Previously, if you renamed the right column, it would break a bunch of stuff. But now it doesn't do that. It actually renames everything for us and works very nicely. One of the other things that is also a new improvement, and this is kind of a minor thing as well, is that you can now refresh the data for an individual table. Previously, you could only refresh the whole model, but now you can do individual tables. So you can do a refresh on the individual tables. So that's pretty nice. Let me get rid of this here. All right. And there's also another new feature around the way that Power BI handles dates. So for instance, I've got this column here, donation date. And so if I bring this in, let's add a column chart here. All right, and I'm going to take my donation date, and I'm going to drop this here on the axis here. And actually, let's do this. All right, so those are the kind of things that I wanted to show you around the live query. All right, so let's do this. I'm going to open up a new instance of Power BI here. And I actually want to do an import here because I want to show you some of the new features that you get when you start importing data into the Power BI model. All right, I'll close this now. Okay, so let's do a quick import here. I'm going to import some data. All right, let's do this. Got another data warehouse here around some absence data. So I'll select the related tables, bring that in here, and I'm going to click load. Now instead of selecting direct query, I'm actually going to do an import here, and it's going to import this data. So this shouldn't take very long to do the import. It's not too much data in this particular database. So just bear with me here one moment. But one of the things that they've done in the last couple of months is the way that Power BI handles dates. And so that it's built in some nice functionality around the way that we can work with dates in Power BI. So previously, whenever you needed to do any type of analytics around dates and date time columns, you had to have a date dimension, right? You wanted to have a date dimension in your data warehouse or in your cube or something like that, so that way you could leverage those date columns. Well, one of the things that we get in Power BI now is the way that Power BI handles the dates. So for instance here, I've got a date column here that exists in this table, absence date. And in the data warehouse, we do have a date dimension, but I want to kind of show you just the way that this works here. So let's add in here our column chart, and let's bring in the axis here. Oops. I'm not sure what this thing is doing here, so I'm running some stuff here that's not exactly production ready. Let me do this. All right. Okay, let me see if I can remove this, if this will let me remove it. Nope, it's not going to let me do that. All right, let's see if we can do this. Yep, okay. Sorry guys, this thing is taking a dump on me. If you do enough presentations around stuff that's new and stuff that will be coming out, then eventually you break something and everybody gets to see you do it live. So that part is fun. I'll try one more time here. Show you this. All right, instead of bringing in all the tables, I'm just going to bring in the one table here. All right, just bring that in here. And there's actually another table I want to bring in here. Okay, let's try this. Try one more time. Do the import again. All right, there we go. Okay, cross my fingers. I'm going to try and show this to you. I'm going to pick a different date column, so I'm not sure if there's some issue there. So let's try this. I want to add in the date PK here. Okay, here we go. All right, I think we're in business now, so let's try this here. I'm going to bring in my absence count and add this as a value here. Now, one of the things that you get with Power BI when you have a regular old date column, like this column here called date PK, and just to kind of show you what this date looks like, I'm going to go over here to my data view, and you'll see here that I have this column here called date PK, and it's just a column that has some date time values, and this is formatted as a date time, and so we're telling Power BI that this is a date time column and that we can treat it appropriately based on that fact. So you'll notice here that when I added the date column to this chart, it's automatically grouped it by year. And so, and you'll notice over here in the x-axis that, I keep wanting to zoom in, but my zoom in's having an issue here, is that it's created basically a hierarchy for me. So I've got my year, I've got my quarter, I've got my month, I've got my day. And so even though I don't have an analysis services style date hierarchy built into this model, it did this for me automatically, added the year, the quarter, the month, and the day. And so one of the nice things that we get with this is the ability to drill down through these layers. So I've just brought in my date column and I brought in my absence count. And so it's just showing a count of how many students were absent in these, or the number of absences in this year. Now I have the ability to just naturally drill down through these levels. So I can turn on my drill down toggle up here, drill down mode is on, and now I can just select these columns and I can drill down through these different levels. So I went down from the year 2009, down to the quarter, down to the month, and now I'm down at the day. And so it automatically creates that hierarchy for us. Now, you do have control over this. You can turn this off on a case-by-case basis. So I brought in the date time column. It did that for me automatically. If I don't want to look at it that way, you can click the drop-down arrow here and tell it to just show the date. And so now you can see that. Now, of course, it's at the same level and my filters are still applied, but I can come in here and remove those filters. And so now you're seeing the individual days. But so you can control that over here, how you want that to work. You can turn the hierarchy back on. And the way that this works and you can't actually see it here in the relationships view. But the way that this actually works is that Power BI behind the scenes actually is creating a shadow table over here that has the columns like the year name, the quarter name, the month number, date, all those different types of columns that you traditionally have in a date dimension. It's actually doing that for us behind the scenes. So you can't see it over here. There are little shadow tables that are invisible. And so for all of the different date type columns that you have in your table, it will do that for you. So if you've got 4 or 5 different date time columns, it's doing that for each one, so that you can have this functionality here, this hierarchy type functionality. And if you don't want to do that, you can actually, there's actually an option to turn this off. If you go up to File and you go to Settings, see, forget where it's at. Data load. Here it is. I think this is it where it's here. Time intelligence, auto date time. So if I uncheck this, it won't do that for me. So in a scenario where maybe you think that's a performance issue, if you have, you know, a lot of date time data types in your model and it's increasing the size of your model and you really don't need the functionality, you can turn this off here. And that will disable Power BI from creating those shadow date hierarchy, those date tables and hierarchies behind the scenes for you to enable this type of drill down functionality. So you can turn that off if you need to. I personally like it. You know, this is a more of a dashboarding tool, and so I personally like the hierarchy functionality in. And usually when I'm doing something for a customer and they don't want to see it that way, I'll just disable you know, the hierarchy drill downs in here and just display the date as necessary. Now, one of the other things that we also have that's a new feature in here is we have the, yes?
Can I interrupt you for a couple questions I think are related here now?
Sure.
Someone asked, so is the date table dimensions still needed?
Okay, so that's a good question. And I would say yes, because if you want to create certain types of calculations, you're probably going to need a materialized date table. Now, and so I would have the date dimension, but you know, it just depends on, you know, when you'll use this just depends on what your data source is. So if you're coming from a data warehouse, chances are you've already got a date dimension, and so you're going to build a lot of calculations that are using those columns in that, so you need it for that. But where this is nice is when you have dates that aren't linked to the date dimension. You know, for instance, you know, if I had a series of dates in a fact table that maybe weren't linked to the date dimension, it's nice to be able to still have this functionality in there. One of the other things that I forgot to mention here is that you can actually control the levels in here. So if for instance, my users don't care about quarter, I can click the X next to quarter, and now I've removed my quarter level. So now when I drill down, instead of going down to the quarter, I just go straight down to the month. So you have some control over the way that this hierarchy is going to work. And like if I don't care about year, I can get rid of year, and now I've got a hierarchy that's just the month and the day. So you have some flexibility around this, but I would say that you still need the date dimension. You're still going to need that for, you know, your more advanced types of calculations, and for, you know, probably for different types of reports that you may build, because the date dimension or the date table that gets created for these date time columns is limited, right? And you don't have any control over what columns are in it. It just kind of does this automatically for you to give you this functionality. But if you want things like, you know, most people have fiscal calendars, most customers have fiscal calendars, so you obviously still need a date dimension to support those types of things.
Yeah,
that's a good question.
That was one of the other questions. Is there a way to take advantage of that date time intelligence with user-defined fiscal years rather than calendar years?
Yeah, so there are calculations that you can create to leverage those fiscal calendars. But to, you know, if you have a fiscal calendar that you want to build into your model, you're going to have to do that with a custom date dimension. You know, this isn't going to do it for you, right? This is going to be just a traditional calendar. So for those custom fiscal calendars, you're going to need a custom date dimension, and then from there you can build your calculations around those fiscal periods. And there's ways to do that.
Okay, and just stepping back a second, someone said, is there a limit on how much data you can bring in?
So there is a limit, and there's a limit to how much you can deploy out to the service too. So if you're on a free SKU, you're limited to 1 gig. if you're on the Pro, now you're limited to 2 gig, or I'm not sorry, not 2, 10 gig. And this information is coming right from the pricing page on the Power BI on PowerBI.com. And so when you think of it, 1 gig and 10 gig is not a whole lot, but you have to remember that behind the scenes, this is analysis services tabular, and it's using the X velocity engine, really great columnar compression, and so I've got a lot of stuff deployed out there, and I haven't ever run into any storage issues. And if you have really big data sets, like analysis services cubes that are in the hundreds of gigs in size or terabytes in size, or data warehouses that are just as big, you're not going to be importing the model in there, right? You're going to be leaving that data on-prem, using the Power BI Enterprise Gateway, so that way you can send your queries directly to the data source without having to import that data into Power BI, and that really gives you a nice advantage to giving your users the latest and greatest data, because as soon as that cube is processed, as soon as that data warehouse is refreshed, you're seeing live data in Power BI because the queries are being sent back to the data source live.
So with the direct query, can you do direct query to non-SQL server databases, i.e. Oracle?
Yes, you can. That's actually a new feature. I think that was in the past month. You can use direct query with Oracle, and you can use direct query with Teradata now. So the data sources you can use you can use SQL Server, of course, Oracle, Teradata, SQL Server Analysis Services, and that's all I can recall right now that you can use the direct query method. But that is a new feature.
So when you were talking about this date, were you talking about shadow tables too?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's 2 questions there. Can we overwrite the shadow tables, say a company's year starts in July like Microsoft?
Mm-hmm. So currently you cannot, right? So if I come in here to the model, and the shadow tables exist. I've seen the the developer versions of Power BI that show the tables, and so currently there is no way to control those things, but I can neither confirm nor deny that may change at some point in the future. So they exist there, 1 table for every date column. So in this particular case, I think I've got a date time column here, absence date. I've got a date PK. I'm not sure, birth date in here, right? And maybe a couple other dates, right? And so I would have 1 date table for each of these date time columns, and they're here. They're just in the background, so that way we can create these nifty drill down type reports that allow our users to look at data at a high level, but then also drill down to a lower level, down to the month level or down to the day level if necessary.
All right, we'll let you keep going.
Okay, cool. All right, good questions, guys. All right, let me open up another instance of Power BI here. Now, for a while, we've had the ability to create the Power BI, use a direct connection to the analysis services tabular model. So we've had that feature for a while. And ever since that feature was released, people said, well, can we do it with multidimensional cubes? And the answer was no, we're working on that, and we can't do that currently. Well, now we can. So that feature has been implemented. So if I go up here to get data and I select analysis services, and type in my analysis services instance here, you'll see here now I have an option to do a live connection, or I can do an import of the data. So I'm going to do a live connection here. Connect to my analysis services cube. I hope it's running. Let's see. Server name is incorrect. Let me just make sure it's running. Of course, when I tested this earlier, it was, but now it's not. But now we can do a live connection to the multidimensional cubes. So that part is super nice. One of the other things. Oh, and I meant to show this a moment ago. All right, let me show this on this screen here while that's coming up here. We also have the ability to build our hierarchies into Power BI. So, for instance, over here, I've got a data model that's imported, or it's really just from an Excel spreadsheet, that has some student grade data, I can create hierarchies within my Power BI model here. And so previously, if you wanted a hierarchy, you had to do an analysis services, right? You had to create the relationships in a cube or set your hierarchy up in your tabular model, however you're going to do that. But now we can create our hierarchies in Power BI. So if I come in here and I select right-click on my subject, I can say, hey, look, I want to create a brand new hierarchy. So I can click New Hierarchy, and now I've got a hierarchy here. All right, with my subject, and maybe I want to add my class name to it, so I can add it to my subject hierarchy. So I've got my subject, I've got my class, and I think and then the teacher. So I can put the teacher under the class. So let's do that. Add to subject hierarchy. And so now I've created a user-defined hierarchy in my Power BI model that allows me to go down from my subject to my class name and to my teacher. And you end up with the same kind of, it sort of works the same way as the date time hierarchy that we were looking at a few minutes ago. So when I click the check mark next to my subject hierarchy, you'll see that it adds those as 3 different fields, and I've got this nifty little hierarchy. But if I add this as a visual, and let's bring in the points possible, you'll see here that I automatically get that drill down functionality. So I can drill down from my subject down to my class, and then down to the teachers that are teaching in that class. And so now we have the ability to create those user-defined hierarchies within Power BI and give our users the ability to drill down from those upper levels down to the lower levels. So that's a super nice feature, and I think that one was also released here in the last month. All right. Okay. Let me start up my analysis services here because I wanted to show you some of the functionality that we get around analysis services. Okay. Let me restart this, and I'll move on while this service here is restarting. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, if you're familiar with Power BI, you know that there are a whole host of visuals, and if you've been playing around with Power BI, you know that Microsoft open sourced the visual stack for Power BI. So if you go to powerbi.com/visuals, you'll see all the different visuals that have been produced by people on the Power BI team, third parties that then the visuals then get vetted and verified by the Power BI team. And so we end up with all these really, really great, some of them are pretty darn impressive custom visuals that you can download. And they're releasing the new visuals all the time. And so, with Power BI, you kind of get the classic default Power BI charts, like the column chart, the bar charts, the line charts, all the classic type things. But now you have these visuals that are being produced by third parties that really just incredibly expand the capabilities of Power BI. So you've got things in there like bullet charts, table heat maps, bubble maps. Even if you want a chart that looks like fish swimming around in an aquarium, it actually exists, and you can download this. And this is really interesting because the bigger the fish, the bigger the number, right? The size of the fish represents the number, right? And then they actually swim back and forth in the aquarium, and you can click on them. So it's pretty funny. But they've got a lot of different visuals in here, and so they release these new visuals all the time. And so some of the really cool ones that I'm going to show you here in a few minutes is the sand dance one. So if you watched the Data Insight Summit keynote that was a couple of days ago, they showed the sand dance. I think they also showed the line chart, the line dot chart, and they probably showed some of the other ones here. And so I'm going to show you those here as well. All right, I got this puppy up and running here. I forgot I had turned off SQL Server Browser, and so that's why I couldn't connect here. So hopefully this thing will come back to life. because there's a couple of things I wanted to show you here. All right, while that is cooking. Now, these visuals, these are all free to download, so you can download these whenever you want. You just come up here, you click on the visual that you want, you click download visual, you know, it just says, hey, this isn't licensed and supported by Microsoft, so if it breaks at some point, don't email us. That's basically what it says. But once you click I agree, then you can download it, and then you can import it into your reports. So let's do this here. All right, good, that came back up. This is my analysis services connection. All right. And so the way that you can import those is in the Visuals tab of Power BI. You click the little ellipsis here. You click Import from File. You can click Import. And you can find wherever the files get downloaded to. So I've got a folder here where I download mine into my Downloads folder, my Power BI Visuals here. And so you download them in here, and this is where you can select to import them. Now, I already have these particular visuals imported here, and you can see them that I've got my Sandance chart here, I've got the line dot chart, and then I've also got the globe map, which if you're familiar with Power Map from Excel, that's what the globe map is. It mimics the Power Map kind of 3D globe, if you guys remember what that was like. Okay, now the Sandance is very cool. This is probably one of the neatest visuals that I've seen so far, and if you watch the keynote, you saw this one and were blown away just like I was. So I've got this spreadsheet here. This isn't education related, but it is on power plants that are in the U.S., so coal producing and oil producing power plants. And so I've got longitude and latitude type data in here, and so I can select my longitude and select my latitude, and you can select how you want these distributed. Okay, so pretty neat there. You can see how it's kind of spreading out here and giving us a neat visual. So we can see that the data points here that are being plotted here, longitude and latitude-wise. Now let's see. I want to view the total capacity, so I can bring in my total capacity, and you'll see that it's roughly in the shape of a map of the United States, and so you can kind of see Florida's down here, and the Northeast is up here, and there's Texas. And then if I want to add in the coal oil filter here, I can do that. Now, you'll notice over here on the right that it just kind of adds them all into values. And this is a really unique chart because all of the filters and slicing and the control of this chart actually happens within the chart itself up here. So that's different from the other charts where all of the formatting and items and where you want the values to go all happens over here. But in this particular chart, it all happens up here. And this just really goes to show you some of the capabilities that you have with the open source stack of Power BI. This is impressive as far as what you can do with this. So if I want to say color this by coal or oil, I can select that, and I'll see the coal are the blue and the others are going to be the red. Okay, so then I can also tell it, do I want to view this as a scatter or do I want to view this as a column? And when I click column, you'll see that it now splits into columns. So that's pretty slick in my opinion. You know, we haven't seen charts like this at Microsoft ever. I don't think, you know, outside of some of the things we saw in Power Map, I mean, this is pretty awesome. And then we can 3D rotate this. You know, this is pretty amazing if you ask me, and I'm a data nerd, so maybe I'm easily impressed, but I think this stuff is pretty slick. And so you have a lot of control over you know, what these, you know, what you can, how you can visualize the data, especially with this particular Sandance chart. So it's pretty cool. They also had over here, where is it at? You could do a 3D scatter too. So if you do a 3D scatter, then what you'll see is this map is now 3D, and so the items with the more total capacity are going to be higher, and then the items with the lower total capacity are going to be lower. And so I'm still viewing, it's like I'm viewing my map, but I can still see, easily see where my more capacity is at. And so that's the Sandance chart. That's brand new. That just came out this week. So pretty cool. The other chart, and I'll show you this quickly here. We've got the line chart here. So if I want to look at my points scored, and I want to look at this by due date. Oops, I didn't have my chart selected. Let me do that again really quick. Points scored, and I'm going to change this to due date instead of using the hierarchy. And so this is sort of like the scatter chart. In the scatter chart, you have the play button where you can animate a scatter chart, so you can kind of see how all the different dots move around. The line dot chart is sort of the same way, except now instead of seeing a scatter chart, we just have a line chart. And so you can see when I click the play button up in the top left, I can kind of see how these how my students are performing. Are they trending up? Are they trending down? And I kind of animate that and give my users a neat view of the data. And of course the dots are interactive, so I can hover over them and I can click on them and use them as slicers just like you can with all of your other charts. And so the line dot chart is also a new feature. And then the last visual that I'm going to show you here is the globe map. Let me put this out here. Got the address. I'm going to plot the address as the location, and I want to put the total capacity as the bar height. And you can see here that it's plotting this on my map. I can zoom in by using my mouse roller to zoom in here. And if I left click and drag, then it rotates the globe. So you can kind of see that I'm rotating the globe. If I right click and drag, it's actually panning. So I can kind of, if I right click and drag down, you can see I can pan to the top, and then I can kind of give myself a different view of the data. All right, and then let's put the coal and oil as the legend. And so you see that the coal and oil is going to be the yellow, and I think the purple is the coal. And then you can also display a heat map on top of this being maps layer. So then if I pick, let's see, let's do oil capacity and put the oil capacity as the heat intensity. You can see here that now I'm also creating the heat map on this particular map. And so this is also a new visual. This one has just this one is not as new as the other ones. This one has been out for a little while, but I think it's within this year. But I lose track of all of it because it come out so fast. So pretty neat. Okay, so now I've got my live connection here to analysis services. We'll come back over here. I wanted to show you the live connection to the OLAP cube. And so I've got this live connection here, so now you can create your live connection to your OLAP cube. And this is big because if you're like many of my customers, chances are you have a lot of OLAP cubes, but you don't have a lot of tabular models. And so it was nice to have the live connection to tabular models, but we didn't have the live connections to the OLAP cubes. But now we do. And they've also added the navigation folders. So see here that I've got a folder here called Target Measures, and those display folders are now visible in Power BI. So this is really nice from a usability perspective, especially when you have very large cubes that have a lot of measures. Chances are you're leveraging the display folders feature, so that way you can create some intuitive navigation for your users who are trying to figure out what measure they're looking for. Now you can view the display folders in Power BI, so those users that are looking for the target measures will see the folder and can easily add that and see that in the chart. Okay, neat things that we can do here, and let's come back over here. We'll use this data set that we were using over here. Let me resize this. Okay, and I'm going to add in the, let's see, add in the state. Okay, and instead of viewing this as a map, what I want to do is I want to view this as a slicer, and I'm going to select slicer here. So now you've got a slicer here. One of the new things that you can do with the slicers is you can actually orient these horizontally. So the default is to show it as a visual list, which you may want that, or as a vertical list. But now you can change this to a horizontal. So you can see you've got the control over the orientation here. You can flip this to a horizontal, and so now I've got a horizontal list of my states. And I can click the arrow to kind of thumb through this list and select Florida down here. So obviously you got some issues with the data here as far as the addresses and things, but you see here that now we've got a horizontal slicer. And I can resize this, make this nice and neat, increase the usability for my users. Put this up at the top, and so you can do neat things like that with Slicer. Also with the Slicer, you have the control over the selection control, so you can turn on a select all if you want to. And you can also turn on and off single select. So if you want the user to only be able to select one state at a time like this when they're just doing the single clicks, that's an option. If I turn off the single select, now when I click, I can multi-select here. So you have some control over the functionality of the slicers here, which is really nice because it just kind of makes things a little bit easier, especially when you're dealing with a limited amount of real estate in your report. All right. Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to show in the Power BI desktop. Those are some of the new features in the Power BI desktop. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump over to the Power BI service and show you a few features over here. And there's some really cool stuff in the Power BI service that I want to show you here. So I'm going to log in here, and I'm on the internal Microsoft tenant. So maybe you might notice some things in here that aren't in your tenant, and so that's because they feed us the dog food. They feed the dog food to us before they feed you the steak, so we get to kind of see that. One of the neat things that you get here in the Power BI service is you get the quick insights. And what quick insights is behind the scenes is it takes your data and it runs it through some machine learning algorithms to identify patterns and outliers in the data that you may not necessarily notice. So I've got my student success data set deployed here. If I click on the little ellipsis here and click Quick Insights, what it does is it takes this data set and it's running it through those machine learning algorithms. And you can see up here in the top right, it say, hey, we're doing this, we're producing the insights, we're going to give you a little notification here when it's ready. So this shouldn't take very long because the data set is not very big, but it's running it through these algorithms. And so now I can click View Insights. And so what it's going to do now is it's actually going to give me a series of charts with some different outliers and different patterns in the data that it's identified. And so we as human beings, we aren't necessarily good at looking at a list of numbers and being able to identify interesting patterns and outliers and things. And so that's what we have the Quick Insights for, is that it can identify these patterns and outliers in the data for us. And so, some of these may not be very useful, but some of these might be very useful. And so you just got to come through here and look at these Quick Insights and see if any of them can expose some interesting insights in the data to you. One of the nice things here is from here you can click the little pin button and pin that visual to your dashboard without having to come in here and build this. So that part is really cool. I'll also point out here, notice the trend line here. That's a new feature too. So now we get the trend lines built into the scatter chart, and you can start adding this. So I'm actually not sure if this has been released yet. This might still be, and maybe somebody in the audience who is on the public Power BI tenant can see if this exists here. But I'm not sure. I can't remember if this is released. If you don't see that in yours, that's because it hasn't been. So some of the stuff that we're talking about here was just announced this week, so I'm safe to talk about it outside of NDA. But I can't remember if this is a particular feature that's been released. One of the other things that you also get, and this was just released a couple of months ago, is the ability to take a report and publish it to the World Wide Web. So I've got this report here that's got my dashboard built on my student success data. I can come up here to my File button and click Publish to Web. And when I click Publish to Web, what that does is it gives me a little iframe code. And I can take this iframe code and I can embed it wherever I want to embed it at. So if I want to put it in a web page, if I want to put it in an application, if I want to do whatever I want to do with it, I can put this iframe code. And so when I do that, what happens is that this report gets embedded in that web page, for instance. And so this is really nice because those users don't have to have a Power BI license. They can just go to the web page, see the report, and it's completely interactive, just like you were in the Power BI portal. Now, I've got an example here, Power BI published to web. Oh, I thought I had it here. I couldn't remember where I put it, so let me do a quick search real quick. Forget what Power BI published to web. There it is, published to web. It's currently in preview here. And so one of the neat things that you can do, and here's an example of it, and this is exactly the way that it looks. The Power BI report gets embedded right in the web page. And so it's completely interactive. You can click on the filters just like you could if you were in the Power BI portal, and it looks like it's just built into the web page. So it's super cool. I didn't have to log in or anything to see this. And so the upside is that you can make this data public. Now the downside is if when you use publish to web, the data becomes public. So anybody who can get to that report can see it. So if you put it on your blog, everybody in the world is going to be able to see that. So just something to be aware of there. We're running out of time here, so I'm going to show you a couple of more things that I think are really cool. And this was just announced this week. When I click this ellipsis here to this data set, you may notice that I've got this option here to analyze in Excel. And so I know that this has been a feature that has been requested for a very long time now. Everybody says, can I connect to Power BI with Excel? Can I connect to Power BI with Excel? Well, now you can. So if I come here and I select the data set, I can click Analyze in Excel. It downloads the ODC file for that. And now, and it's opened it up here on my other screen, and I'll pull it over here in a moment. While it's creating the connection here. 1 second. All right. Now I've got my Excel workbook here with a pivot table and a connection to my Power BI model here. So I can come in here and build my pivot tables, my charts. I can build in anything that you can normally do in a pivot table, you can do now. So Power BI, when we say it's analysis services in the cloud, that's becoming even more and more true every day now, because now we can interact with it just like we do with analysis services. And analysis services, you can connect to your cubes and tabular models with Excel, and now you can connect to your Power BI models and with Excel. So very, very cool. Now you can do that. So this actually here is coming this month. This is not currently available on the public tenant, so you won't see this yet, but it is coming out this month, so you'll get to see that. So I know there's probably many of you in the audience that are clapping and because you've been wanting this for a long time. Also with that, when I come down here and I click the Get Data button here in my tenant and select Files, I'm going to close this up here. Okay, there we go. Select Files and close that. If I go out to my OneDrive for Business, I've got an Excel workbook that's out there in my OneDrive for Business. And it's connecting here. All right. Go to my Projects folder. And I've got an Excel workbook here that has some pivot tables and charts in it. I can select that Excel file and click Connect. And I can say, look, I want to import this data as a Power BI data model into Power BI, so I have access to the data model. So if you have a great Power Pivot workbook, you can bring that in as a data set and start building your reports and dashboards just like it was a Power BI model. Or I can say, look, I want to leave it in Excel, and I just want to bring this Excel document into Power BI. So when I click Connect Now, it's going to take this Excel file and it's going to import it into Power BI for me. Now you'll see here that I've got this new icon here, the little Excel logo here, and the little asterisk, it's indicating that this is brand new. So when I click this, it's going to open up this Excel sheet, my Excel sheets in Power BI, just like I was looking at it in Excel. So Excel is a first-class citizen with Power BI, and so we get all of the same functionality that you normally have, like with your Excel pivot tables and pivot charts. So if I want to do something like, hey, I want to change this drill down, I want to be able to drill down from subject down to class name, I can add that to it. So now I can drill down from my subjects down into my class name, and so you have control over the way that you can interact with your pivot tables and your pivot charts directly in here in Power BI. And so very cool. You got the traditional Excel filters here, like the value filters, the label filters, the sorting, all of that right within Power BI. So this is also a huge deal with what we can do in Power BI. So they're adding some ridiculous capabilities here compared to if you just think about where they were at just 8 months ago, or what is it? It's March now, so I guess it was 9 months ago when they released this. They've made huge steps in the functionality that they're adding to Power BI. One of the other really cool things is, and this isn't necessarily a new thing, but this will be the last thing I show you, and then we'll open it up for questions here, is you also have the Power BI integration with Windows 10. And so what that means for me as a user is that if I want to gain some quick insights into what's going on, and maybe I'm not logged into the portal at the moment, maybe I'm just in my desktop doing something in Excel or something like that, or I'm just working, right? I'm not logged into the portal. I can come in here and I can open up Cortana, and hopefully this will work, and click the little microphone here. Show me average grade by subject.
Who's the email going to?
Of course. Let's try this. Okay. What is the average grade by subject? All right. Get your act together, Cortana. All right, there we go. And so now I can just ask Cortana, and when I've linked up my Power BI account with Cortana, now I can come directly into my Windows 10 environment. And even if I don't have the desktop tool here, even if I'm not logged into the portal, I can come in here and I can start asking Cortana questions about what's going on with my data. And so one of the nice things is from here, you can click Show More Details in Power BI, and then it'll take you back to the portal, and then you can take this visual that we've built and then and pin it to our dashboards. So the functionality that they're adding around Power BI is very impressive, very cool, some of the different things that you can do there. So with that, we'll open it up to questions here. I'm sure there's probably a few questions
Yeah, we have
that you guys have asked.
that's a great presentation. I really like what you're just showing now. That's pretty cool. The pivot table and the Power BI. That's pretty neat. That
Yeah,
two answers. Lucas said yes, those trend lines have been released. So that
okay, great.
the question you had earlier was answered there. Sarah wants to know if there's an email address we can send you questions for later.
Sure. Yeah. So 4 questions. I'll go ahead and put this up on the screen. I didn't even get time to go over the mobile BI stuff. Let's see. I mean, there's all kinds of, man, I didn't even get to like half my slide deck to show you all the cool stuff. But so if you want to get in touch with me, you can. Well, I thought I had my email up on there, so my apologies. I thought that was on there. Let me put it up there real quick. All right. There we go. You can email me at duryan@microsoft.com. You can follow me on Twitter there, and you can tweet me too, and I respond to those. And there's my blog too. So I have a lot of Power BI, SQL Server BI content out there as well.
Okay. She also asked, what's the pros and cons comparing this to reporting services?
Well, they're different tools, and that's a good question. And so, with the reporting services, especially SQL Server 2016, reporting services is designed to be more of a pixel perfect type reporting tool, right? And so with reporting services, those reports, are traditionally they're going to be rolled out by IT. IT is going to be creating the reports and rolling them out to the organization there. And reporting services is on-prem, right? And so the content that you're developing in reporting services is going to be deployed typically, to some server you have somewhere that's running reporting services. It could be in the cloud. You could be running reporting services in Azure. And Power BI is in the cloud, right? So the content that we build in Power BI gets deployed out to the Power BI service. And Power BI definitely has a self-service aspect to it as well. So you don't have to be a developer or a SQL Server genius or anything like that to be able to get into Power BI and start building some really cool reports. And so I don't consider them pros and cons. I consider them just differences between the tools. Power BI has a more self-service aspect to it. SSRS is going to be a pixel perfect reporting tool, and so no one tool is a silver bullet that's going to resolve all of your reporting requirements. But I see them working very closely together, and that's evidenced by the fact that you can pin SSRS visuals to Power BI, and they've also announced that you'll be able to publish Power BI files to SSRS, and so they're integrating those two tools very closely together. And so it's not one tool that is going to, be your silver bullet for everything. I see them each having a place in your organization.
Okay, the next question is from Jonathan. Is there a way that I can make the shadow tables appear during the BI model formatting?
Yeah, currently there isn't. The only control you have over that is to be able to turn them off or turn them on. That may change at some point in the future, but that's currently the way that it is.
All right, so another gentleman has some questions about, can we project variance analysis using Power BI, which has live connectivity to Essbase, ESSBASE?
Yeah. So the live connection to Essbase isn't currently there. Um, so you won't be able to do a live query, but you should be able to do a import of the data into Power BI, and then once you've done that, then you can and if the data source is too large to import all of it, maybe you can specify a subset of the data in there. But currently, the ability to live connect to Essbase isn't there.
Okay, we also have, is there a way to get around the size limits to use direct query?
Yeah, so if you're using direct query, none of the data is stored in the model, so you don't have to worry about the size limits, right? So if you've got
Yeah.
a 10 terabyte database, it's the database is still at the data center, so you don't have to worry about the size of the database exceeding your Power BI limits.
Okay, can we print with Power BI desktop?
With desktop, I'm not sure if we can do it in the desktop. Let's see, if I come up here and I go to File, I know we can do it in the service. Let's see.
Yeah, they're asking about the desktop here.
Yeah, I don't see it that you can do it here. It's funny. I've never been asked if you could print from the desktop, but I know that you can print from the service. So if I come here and go to File, you can go to Print, and then I can come here and I can print it to one of my printers or as a PDF document. So you've got that functionality there, but I don't see it here in the desktop. So.
All right, next one is, when is Power BI on-prem coming? Can we publish from desktop to SharePoint or an internal site?
So you can embed Power BI into SharePoint currently. There's I think there's an app for that you can download that will allow you to do that. Now if it's published to SharePoint, you still have to be able to log into Power BI. But that capability is currently there. SQL Server 2016 is when you're going to start seeing the functionality to publish Power BI to reporting services on-prem. So they've already announced that.
Okay, and does Power BI have to be in the cloud?
Until SQL Server 2016 is released.
Okay. This gentleman says, I've tried to get data from a website. The data table is not listed on the selections. IT tokens like it is on a SAP BO webpage. Is there a workaround to get the data?
Well, I know in Power BI that you can screen scrape the data from a website. So I'm not sure what the particular issue is there, but in Power BI Desktop, if you come to up here, you select, let's see, I'm using a live connection in there, so I can't get any more data, but if you go to Get Data, you select Web, then you can enter in the URL. If that's not working, then I'm not sure what the particular issue is there.
All right, well, we've run out of time. I thank you again, Dustin. This is the second time you've done a presentation, probably the last year, and I'm sure there's many places that's going to be talking about Power BI, including the past Business Analytics virtual chapter, as well as the Business Intelligence virtual chapter. Thanks again for your time, Dustin. This session has been recorded, and it'll be in our meeting archives with a link to YouTube. Thank y'all for all coming out today. And I believe our next session is going to be from Microsoft. Let's see if I can bring that up on the screen. The next meeting, I think, is going to be April 9th. Let me see if I can share my screen here. Yeah. I got too many windows up. It's going to be April 9th. Gil Ravi, he's one of the program managers, is going to talk about Power Query against a Facebook page, Insights. So please return then. Again, it's recorded. Thank you, Dustin, and we'll see y'all later.